The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the RealFlow 2013 webinar. My name is Sterling Ely. I'm the Marketing and Social Media Coordinator at RFX. And for those of you who may not already know us, RFX is the leading software solution provider for the visual effects industry. We're right in the heart of Hollywood and have over 30 years experience helping clients all over the world realize their projects from beginning to end. In fact, our founder, Ray Feeney, is actually a multiple Oscar winner and a member of both the Academy and the VES. So we know the industry. We're far from just a software store. We take the time to really help our clients understand the projects and find the best tools for your needs and keep everything running smoothly. I often joke that Andrew, our tech, who is here on this call, is largely responsible for keeping most of Hollywood running. As part of our ongoing efforts to expand our customers' VFX capabilities, we regularly host workshops, user groups, and webinars such as today with NextLimit. And don't forget, if you find yourself needing another RealFlow license or render node, we're offering a 20% discount on all RealFlow products through the end of this Friday. And now, without further ado, I give you Victor Sanchez, product specialist at NextLimit, who will be showing you all about RealFlow 2013 and Hybrido 2.
All right. Thank you very much, Sterling, and thank you very much to all attendees. Hope you all can hear me right. Thank you very much to the RFX family, which is supporting us day by day, and welcome to this RealFlow webinar. Just would like to confirm, to double check that you guys can watch my screen. Okay, can you see it right there? Okay. Okay, and now I get finally that pop-up menu. Okay, there we are. Cool. So let's get started to take a look at Hybrido 2, our large-scale simulation technology for RealFlow 2013. First of all, I would like to introduce myself. I'm a product specialist. I'm a NextLimit product specialist, and please feel absolutely free to contact me for whatever feedback, questions, matters that you want. Get in touch. You have just right here my email. And moving forward, this is the scene we're going to take a look at in this webinar. It's pretty much this sort of a hall or corridor. And what we're going to do is to bring up some water and fluid stuff from behind. It's pretty much a dam break, a pretty cool dam break actually. So as you can see here, we are working with a few different elements, such as the mesh, the fluid mesh itself, some different particles, areas, and even some wet maps for Hybrido. So this is actually a OpenGL capture of the simulation we're going to take a look at. maybe we can play it again. Just let me get back and just show you pretty much the setup is very simple. Actually, it's just a sort of corridor. As I told you before, we're going to set up a couple of proxies here, working directly from Maya and inside RealFlow. And we will take advantage of the fluid velocity and speed to move dynamically the doors as well. And well, this is pretty much what we have. And I think that, well, actually I was not concerned in this particular example. In this particular case, I was not concerned about improve or optimize the simulation itself in terms of time. I rather prefer stay focused on the basics and fundamentals for those of you who are not familiar with Hybrido, and for those of you who are already familiar with this technology, I will hopefully try to get to provide you with some tips and some common mistakes that at least for me were very, very useful in past projects. Okay, so let me start over with a very, very quick overview of this session. First of all, we're going to work outside RealFlow. Actually, we're going to start up directly and taking a look at the geometry that we have in our scene, and we're going to distinguish between the static geometry and the dynamic geometry. The static and dynamic geometry here obviously one is the opposite of another. So basically we're going to deal with this static corridor with a cube here, and we will drive the doors as I told before with the behavior of the fluid itself. And then we will take a look at the derivatives of this geometry, and we will work with proxies. Bear in mind that these derivatives, these proxies, are a low resolution or a low poly version of the final geometry. We rarely work with the final geometry in RealFlow. And the technique we are going to follow in this case for the doors that you can see here, there's a lot of some different bunches or pieces of geometry. We have the glasses, the frames, we have some sort of additions here. What we're going to do is actually work with a couple of boxes actually, and then parent this final geometry to the proxies. So in order to get a faster simulation. And of course, we will take a look at from my point of view, in my opinion, the most important factor when dealing with, specifically with large scale simulations, which is the scale. Understanding the scale is crucial to achieve nice looking large scale simulation, and it's going to clearly make the difference. This is the part where we will spend most of the time. We're going to take a look at the different steps. I don't pretend that you follow me right here with this diagram at this time, but just to bear in mind that we will go step by step actually, talking a little bit about some different aspects of these different Hybrido elements. And actually, we will get mostly focused on the simulation itself, but anyway, we will provide some rendering tips and suggestions as well in order to improve your RealFlow simulations. It's pretty much what we want to achieve, and hopefully we will end over with a Q&A session. Anyway, bear in mind that you can submit your questions anytime during this webinar. We have the crew in the background. We have Katie Norris, we have Luis Miguel. All of you will probably know Luis Miguel's RealFlow blog. And of course, we have the lead developer, Angel, so feel free to submit your questions. And we will try to answer them as much as possible. If there are any that we cannot handle in this session, we will try to answer them afterwards and send you via email the answers. And well, so let's get started a little bit talking about the geometry setup. In this case, I'm going to work with Maya. And let me begin from scratch with a few tips. First one is to set up the right scale in your 3D platform. If you're going to work with a large scale simulation, it doesn't make sense at all to work with a sort of miniatures scale. So it's really, really important whether you're using centimeters or meters. It's really important to bear in mind that the scale is really important, as we will see later. The normal orientation of the geometry must be properly set, especially if you're going to deal with soft or rigid body dynamics. And QBs, for the case of the wet maps, you may be familiar with SPH wet maps. And unfortunately, in Hybrido, the wet maps is not a one-button solution yet. We will try to improve and work in that part, but it's possible to achieve wet maps with the help of some graphs, as we will see later, and provide you some stuff to deal with your own wet maps. And as mentioned before, whenever it's possible, use boxes, of course. So we're going to distinguish between these static geometry and this dynamic geometry. We're going to work with separate objects. Even we're going to cache this data in different files when we bring them in Maya. Taking a look at the Maya scene, too much stuff here. This is pretty much what we have. Let me hide the fluid layers here. So if you want to take a look at how will we handle the geometry of the doors, for instance, here we have, as mentioned before, some different pieces which are going to be linked to these red boxes, which are actually the these boxes here, which are actually the geometry that we will simulate in RealFlow and will bring back here in Maya. Okay, so static versus dynamic geometry. This is, as I told before, in my opinion, the most important factor to achieve the look of a massive simulation, the scale. The scale is going to determine if your martini glass is going to look like a swimming pool, or if your flooding scene, city flood, is going to have the appearance of a few droplets bumping over a bunch of boxes of shoes, for instance. It's going to be critical to work on this aspect. And in the beginning, RealFlow implemented the SPH technology, the smoothed particle hydrodynamics, but in RealFlow 5 and later versions, we implemented Hybrido, which is currently in its version 2. It's an implicit solver. It's a proprietary implementation of the flip solver. And bear in mind that this is really important to bear in mind, is really each one of these little squares in RealFlow, it equals 1 meter. So in order to achieve the perfect scale matchup, the perfect match, you might think that, well, if this sort of martini glass is pretty much like 10 centimeters diameter here in its face, I'm going to reproduce exactly this scale. Well, this doesn't work. It doesn't work that way, actually, because the problem is that if you go that way and try to work with the real scale in these sort of low scale simulations, you will probably need to crank up the RealFlow substeps, and one or two you will get endless simulations if you crank up the substeps too much, or if the substeps are not high enough, you will realize that RealFlow might be unstable and even crash. So this is why we rarely, when dealing with this sort of scenes, we rarely work with one-to-one scale. You may want to crank up a little bit the scale and just even increase the forces, work on increasing the gravity magnitudes and things like that in order to achieve a more realistic look. In this particular scene, in this particular case that we're going to treat here, this is perfect for working in a one-to-one scale. By one-to-one, I mean pretty much 3 meters, about 3 meters approximately here, from side to side. Is going to be the same 3 meters that we will have in the RealFlow space, because otherwise we will, as I told you before, we will get simulation which doesn't implement this large scale NAS-looking. And of course, in the opposite case, if we have a huge, massive, really large scale simulation like flooding the city, for instance, you may want to decrease, you may want to balance that scale in order to not to work with buildings of, I don't know, 200 meters high, for instance. Probably, let's say, divided by a factor of 10 or something like that will probably work very well. Same thing if you're dealing, with other sort of massive elements such as mountains, valleys, or things like that. So how do we bring this geometry from our 3D platform, or Maya in my case, to RealFlow? Well, dealing with scale is something really personal. It depends on your own preferences, on your own choices, but I'm going to tell you about two different options here. The first one is to parent your geometry, your proxies in this case, to a null object. You have to bear in mind that you will have to freeze your geometry, parent to a null object or allocator, and then downscale that locator or upscale that locator, and then freeze it again and bring it back to RealFlow. We're going to make a very quick example of this situation. So we have here, as you can see, my scale here is in centimeters. Is one of these tiny gray squares here. It equals 1 centimeter, and as you can realize, this is pretty much like the 3 meters wide space. 3 meters per, I don't know, maybe 15 per 3, something like that. And so what we want to do is we can select the geometry, and we can parent that geometry to a locator. I actually created a previous locator. Here we have the allocator just right in the middle of the scene, and the whole geometry, the whole proxies that we have here are parented to this master scale. So in this case, the issue here is that for some reason there is a sort of offset between Maya and RealFlow. You will probably be familiar with this issue if you have dealt with Maya RealFlow in the past. You will figure out that it doesn't matter if you're using centimeters or meters. When you try to export a geometry and bring it back to RealFlow, you will realize that the things are 100 times bigger. And
porque estoy aquí escuchando.
I think we have sort of interface. Okay. So as I told you before, this is going to be exported with a locator that we're going to scale to 0.01. In other words, 100 times smaller, and we're going to export it as an SD file, proxies underscaled. Okay. Okay. So in this case, I'm going to import that geometry, and I'm going to show you the grid. So if you take a look at the geometry itself and the grid, here you are, pretty much the 1 to half and half, pretty much the 3 meters from side to side that we have been talking about before. The thing with this method is that it works very well, but you just have to bear in mind the following. We have here our bunches of nodes. I don't pretend that if you are completely new to Hybrido, follow me at this time, but it's just to let you know how important it is to deal with locators when you bring back and forth geometry inside RealFlow and your 3D platform. So what I'm going to do is to bring my emitter here, which is actually selected for this cube. This geometry cube is going to create particles. I'm not going to put gravity and anything at this time. It's just to get a very, very quick idea of how to bring back fluid stuff when we get back to Maya in this case. So what I'm going to do is to simulate a very blowy, something like that, mesh here. It doesn't matter, it's just for a test purpose. So this is pretty much what we have right here, okay? I have simulated 20 frames, and the thing is that if here is the binary meshes, the thing is that if I want to bring back my stuff right here, and I'm going to get back these guys here, get back to scale 1 and freeze. Okay, now you'll see that this fluid stuff was simulated according to the downscale geometry. So it's so simple as adding a locator, applying the fluid stuff to the locator, and crank up the locator 100 times. Okay, so now I have my one-to-one, my frozen geometry here, and the fluid stuff according to the same scale and same ratio as I simulated in RealFlow. Okay, so this is again, it's your personal choice. This is the method that I mostly use in the vast majority of cases. And the other option that we have is forget about the parenting thing and just bring the whole geometry to RealFlow, and directly in RealFlow set up a internal scale to work with that. So this is pretty much the following. I'm going to remove this guy here, and this is the geometry that we have right now in Maya. So I'm going to export it 0, we don't have any animation or something, and I'm going to export it as proxies as it is, as the scene is. So the thing is that if I import that geometry right inside RealFlow, here is the scene. I'm going to reset and bring back my huge geometry 100 times bigger than it is in RealFlow. So what we can do is just by enter here and modify the scale 100 times. Okay. Now I'm back to the same situation without need of parent or things like that. The thing is that I have touched this button here, and if you take a look at the cube that I was initially using for the emitter for create particles, it has a 1:1 scale, but internally RealFlow is dividing it by 100 times. So I will have to crank it up 100 times again. Okay. So if I simulate a few frames, let's say 10 frames for instance. Okay. Here we have our meshes, our 10 frames. I'm going to remove the rest. So here I will have, once again, to parent this guy to allocator and crank it up. Not crank it up actually, it's not necessary in this case, sorry. In this particular case, we just don't need any locator. I was in a missing frame actually. So in this case, in this second case, you don't have to deal with any locator when jumping back and forth RealFlow. So it's up to you to determine or to decide if you want one way or another. Just bear in mind, in any case, you will definitely have to bear in mind the importance, how important is the scale for your simulations. Okay, so we have, that's this first step right now, and let me talk a little bit about the most typical Hybrido workflow. And we will provide you with some different tutorials and very, very nice videos that we have developed here directly in NextLimit. But most of the time you will find useful that it's interesting to work with, not with the final high resolution fluids and meshes and stuff. It will be really, really important to pretty much set up the actors in the scene. And then now that you have all the actors in the scene and you can pretty much predict how they're going to interact one over another, then crank up your simulation. But let me get started with the domain. For those of you who are completely new to this technology with Hybrido, the domain is where the main body of the fluids will happen. And the domain is basically, the domain data is basically composed by two different elements. One is the RPC, the RealFlow particle cache. In other words, is the particles themselves, the particles that you will find inside the grid cells of the domain. Okay, in this particular capture, OpenGL capture, you will see how the bunch of particles, maybe we can see it again, how this bunch of particles are going to be generated from behind. Here we have in full screen mode. So this is the RPC, this is cache data, the particles themselves that are going to be stored and saved and then cached afterwards in order to generate secondary elements. Okay. Moving forward a little bit, you will find out another element which is really, really important in RealFlow, which is the Hybrido distance fields cache. This, here's the man. This Hybrido distance field cache is useful to resume Hybrido simulations, and is also useful to generate secondary elements such as splash, fall, etc. The thing is that you can, the thing is that you have to bear in mind that it's not always necessary to work with this data, because this particular data is huge. It's really huge, and especially if you're simulating or solving this data and then writing it to this and over the network, etc. Bear in mind that it will take a really important part of your simulation's time, and hard disk drive, by the way. So is it really necessary for your sim? Well, take a look at this example here. We just create a huge massive sim with a bunch of particles here, and we fed all of these particles into a volumetric object, into a Maxwell volumetric object in this case. So we get this nice looking running cloud or something. But the important thing here is that we actually didn't require distance fields at all. We just wanted particles. We just wanted Hybrido particles. So it doesn't make sense to simulate and write and generate and even read when describing things like that other elements that we don't need. And this is crucial when working with Hybrido. It can make the difference between, for instance, as we will see later, generate your, I don't know, displacement maps, for instance, in 3 minutes or 3 hours. So this is really important. Bear in mind, if you are in need of secondaries, then definitely you will have to generate these field scans. But on the other hand, you may be in a different situation. You may be in need of working only with distance fields that you want to embed or apply in Houdini and work directly with them without needing particles, for instance. So just bear in mind to enable what you need in RealFlow. The domain is going to be represented by this sort of node here, and is going to be represented in a RealFlow viewport with this sort of gizmo here. This gizmo is useful to monitor your domain cell size. Okay, in other words, is the resolution. You can take a look at these 4 corners here with a representation of the cell size of the domain. By default, we're going to place 8 particles, 2 to the power of 3 per cell that you will be able to crank up this value later. And also, it's going to be useful to clip the mesh. We will see later how to do that in some different options and different methods. But this is useful to lighter your mesh data, actually. So you can manipulate, you can move, even scale this gizmo here without compromising the simulation at all. Once the simulation is done, you can handle this gizmo if you want to use it for clipping the mesh, for instance. It's also useful for everything related to UVs or projections. For instance, if you're going to work with displacement maps, this gizmo will be the let's say the origin or the main projection, the top projection in this case, for the projection over the mesh. And other everything what is relative to projections and UVs, you can project the velocity maps, for instance, for Hybrido, things like that. Everything is going to be directly related to this gizmo here. Okay, the domain is going to react, is going to interact with other different elements. Mainly, first of all, an emitter element. And we're going to take a look at a very pretty basic setup. like we have done just right here. Let me hide this guy for a while. And with the canvas as well. So this is pretty much the geometry. All of these guys here are the different geometry. You can link them all to a hub or work directly with explosive links, for instance. Okay. So I'm unfortunately cannot extend myself too much in the in these aspects, but we'll provide you some different tutorials and videos and resources to determine how to deal with this sort of interaction. Looks like this one more. Okay, let me take a look. First of all, let me take a look, give you through some different options in the Hybrido simulation that you can find here in the Hybrido tab. Exactly the same as you will deal with SPH. In Hybrido, you will deal with substeps. Actually, the magnitude is completely different. You have a default of 1 and 3 min and maximum substeps, but it's not strictly necessary for such simple simulation like this one. I personally have found that even 1 and 1 may work for me. The strictness is the let's say how RealFlow is going to tend to achieve, to fulfill the maximum steps when it's really necessary. A strictness of 1 means it's absolutely necessary, absolutely mandatory to get these 3 in the most complex cases. A strictness of 0 means that we will probably remain all the time the means of steps. We have other different steps and other different, not steps, but iterations here in order to achieve the accuracy. Personally, I find that these defaults are related to the uncompressibility of the fluid, and in most of the cases, it used to work very well for me as the default. If you need more accuracy, you can crank up the maximum value here to perfectly meet the equations, internal equations of the solver if you want, but once again, I personally prefer to leave these guys as they are. You can certainly use GPU acceleration, which applies for the main generation only, for the particles related stuff of the main. And taking a look at this current stuff is going to, in this particular simulation, is going to apply as well for the doors simulation. So we have here the quality, which is the default. It's actually pretty high from my personal point of view for really, really simple simulations. We can safely work with 10 or 20 maybe, but we just prefer to go absolutely safe and crank it up this value to 60 by default. This jittering value is also pretty interesting, especially for stacking pieces and things like that. Don't think in this value as a demo force, because it's not its main purpose. This is just to control these sort of moving parts when you have a lot of rigid body simulations and stuff, and you have stacking pieces which seems to be vibrating. You can actually reduce this sort of vibration by decreasing this slider here. Otherwise, you can get rid of it. It's a jitter tapper actually. And well, this is pretty much the most important things in regards to the Hybrido simulation settings. Of course, we will need a lot of time to go one by one of these elements, but bear in mind the most important here is, first of all, the cell size that you can see here, how the cell size, the default cell size is 0.3 meters, actually it's 30 centimeters. And it's pretty much the resolution. Obviously, as far as you decrease this guy here, actually in the scene that we did, that we simulate, we use this value here, which is pretty low. And we're going to place these particles in this really tiny cell, so you will gain much more detail, much more resolution, putting it bluntly, and also consider to work with this scale here, so you can even create or with lower cell size. But in my particular case, I will tell you that it's not strictly necessary to work with crazy values here. Another interesting mode or another interesting method to create more particles without using a really tiny cell is by increasing the sampling, both for the surface or for the core. For the surface, for the external boundaries of the fluid, which is really important because it's where everything's happened. The collisions, the secondary emissions, everything is going to be directly related to the surfaces, so it's really important. So I personally find that this value in the default 3 or maybe 4, no more, used to work very well for me for cranking up the number of particles without forcing RealFlow to get crazy with that tiny cell size. This value is the number here to the power of 3. So in the default we will have 8 particles. If we crank this thing to 3, we will have 27 or 64 particles in the case of 4. Once again, don't get really crazy with these values. I think that we used a surface 3 for this guy here. The bandwidth is pretty much the thickness of the external boundaries. Everything behind or inside these RealFlow units here is going to be considered core, and you may want to work with different samplings for the surface and the core here. The jittering is, as you might notice, to avoid regular patterns and spread the particles with some different seeds, so you will get a much more natural looking of the fluid. Okay. In regards to the domain, let me introduce you a couple of things. One is the creation mode that you have here, adaptive by default, and then source path. Putting it bluntly, dense is faster, but it requires much more memory. So as far as you can go with a nice, decent quantity, nice, decent amount of RAM memory, go dense, because the osmosis will go faster. If you're running out of memory, you may consider an adaptive mode. So RealFlow will try to switch between dense and sparse if it's running out of memory, or if you personally find that for some reason you are, I don't know, dealing with a very particular scene where a lot of memory is required, you may want to consider sparse if you don't have memory enough. But for this particular case, my first try will go dense. Absolutely. Okay. I will provide you some details and some other information at the end of this presentation, so bear with me, and you will find that it's not strictly necessary to deal with every single one of these values here. Most of the time, just by dealing with 2 or 3 things, it's something that you're ready to go. Let me move forward a little bit. with the presentation. And as I told you before, we have the emitter. In the emitter tab, we will have to determine what geometry in this emitter here. We selected the cube 01. Okay. So here is where the particles are going to be created. And here is the direction of the emitter itself. Obviously, you can set up a stream with an initial speed, and you can animate this stuff. If you want to take a look at how did we did it for this particular finished setup, we used a nice expression. Here you have a factor with a frequency and with an offset to simulate some sort of fluctuation in the particle generation. Okay, so this value here is going to work as an offset, will decrease or increase the whole curve. This is going to work as a factor. It's going to work with the amplitudes if you want to watch it in that sense. And this is going to work with the frequency, more frequency or less frequency. We're using the factor time here in order to the factor time here of with the sine function in order to determine this fluctuation. On top of this, consider to add some randomness, etc. So it's up to you. This is the fluctuation that we set up for this particular scene. And let me tell you about a really important thing, especially for those of you who pretend to work with cached geometry. If you want to simulate geometry inside RealFlow, and then you want to cache it and interact this geometry with other fluid. In this particular example, we actually use the grid, the main body of the fluid, to interact with the geometry. So the doors are dynamically responding to the fluid, and then we needed to generate on top of that main body of fluid, we needed to generate secondaries, splashes, splash and foam, etc. In this particular case, it's really important to bear in mind the following. By default, the geometry nodes are set up in RealFlow with this stick on or enabled. The animation SD file is going to store the whole current simulation, the whole geometry simulation into one single curve. You may want to disable this option here and enable specifically the curve for this node, for this piece of geometry here. This is really important if you want to cache this simulated geometry afterwards and want this geometry to interact with the recently dynamic simulation, to interact with additional fluids that you will generate or that you will create later. Okay, so always bear in mind this important tip here. Actually, I'm not going to simulate the whole demo scene here, but just let me show how I did it here. You can see that the animation SD file is disabled. These BDC files is an option which is enabled. Actually, these BDCs are suitable for handle, currently handle rigid bodies and sub-body simulations, and stop and resume the simulation. So it doesn't matter if you enable or disable, if you pretend to create the whole simulation along the timeline. But what is important here is that each one of these two cubes, which will be the doors proxies, this one red boxes here has their own curves, F12 to open exponential, has their own SD curve export. Here are all the VDC files, and here you'll find the 11 and 12. Okay, if you bring back your scene to Maya and import the 11, for instance, let me remove this guy. And again, as I followed my locator method, I have to find this guy here and crank it up 100 times. Okay, so if you take a look at this proxy here, you'll see that the curves are perfectly matched and perfectly responded. You have to import one by one these two different elements in this case. You can even make the simulation afterwards, whatever, but this is really, really important, again, if you want to deal with cached objects as we did in this particular simulation. The first secondary elements that we are going to place on top of this domain is a splash and foam emitter. You can see here what we're going to do is to generate some all of these pinky particles here that you can see here is the splash and foam emitter here. We can even watch it in full screen mode. So what we're going to do is to cache the domain and the geometry. We don't want to recalculate the simulation here. We want RealFlow to read directly from the hard disk drive the cached file, the SD files that we exported, and we are going to keep this guy enabled. Okay. Important for foam or splash and foam, consider not to link to gravity forces. Okay, if you have a gravity here, in the particular case of foam, the foam is driven by the domain itself. There is a drag force actually in the RealFlow params. If we add a foam node here, or even, well, the splash and foam that we have just right here, you will have this friction here that we will drag the it will determine how the foam is going to be dragged over the surface of the domain. By the way, foam mean and max lifetime, this value is given in seconds. So 60 means 1 minute here. It doesn't mean frames that we want to achieve. My particular trick for this is that we have these values represented as real values with that 0 here. So is not is fractionals, right? So you can determine some different a portion or a fraction of seconds, but not a portion of fraction of frames. Just to bear in mind that. So you may want to create this splash and foam here, and then link this splash and foam to the domain. Okay, keep the rest of the guys cached, and then simulate the splash and foam in this particular case. Okay, if you take a look at this moment, this is what we have right here. We have the domain with the splash and foam here. Now what we want to do is to generate more particles specifically close to this front area here. So I am just going to move forward, and what we're going to do is to create a different new secondary node here for the splashes. Okay, so this is what we have right now. What we're going to do is to place a, let me put this guy in full screen mode. And what we're going to do is to generate splashes only in the lower areas here. Okay, if you take a look at the scene here, this is the splash floor specifically. Let's move for this frame, for instance, 39. It's going to take a while because it's writing a lot of particle data here, and it's trying to update the timeline cache. But bear in mind that you can place or you can set some different elements, some additional splashes in those particular areas where you need it. Okay, so in this case we have the pink, purple splash and foam, and additionally this box here, this red box here for the splashes. Okay. It's really important to bear in mind, it will save you a lot of time, that if you want to generate here a new element, a new secondary, or in this case a splash node, you don't have to necessarily rev the splash and foam node, for instance. So you may want to disconnect this reading cache inside RealFlow here. You can select this node here and disconnect its elements from export central. So RealFlow, when you set up the following pass for the new secondary, for the new splash element or form, if you want to place here, RealFlow will skip reading this guy here, saving you a lot of time. And this is really, really important, because many times we miss this small trick here, and it really makes the difference. Trust me, whatever you don't need, just remove it. Place it inactive if necessary, and disable reading cache from here. So RealFlow will provide you a much more faster read of your cache data. Okay. The foam is an element that you have to generate after the splash is done, and the foam is done directly from splash. And then the mist that we don't have in this particular project here is given in OpenVDB, which is a format to store splash volumetric data. It's open source, and you can exchange easily with other platforms or rendering solutions. It's really important to add a little bit of detail via displacement. You have here a mesh without displacement, here you have the same mesh with a little bit of displacement. What is important for the displacement is that no particles or fields are required to calculate the displacement. Save your time. Exactly the same as I told before, you don't have to enable the different elements in cache mode and then spend 3 hours all around the timeline with RealFlow reading every single frame with hundreds or even megs of, or even gigabytes of data frame by frame. It is not necessary at all. You can even export as an XML the domain, open it up in a new project, and generate the displacement by yourself. For instance, here you can directly have a domain, get rid of the field cache and the particle cache, just leave the displacement texture here, and of course the RealFlow that you want to generate always the displacement. Okay, so RealFlow in this case is going to generate the diff textures here of the displacement that you'll find here. Okay, these displacement textures here are going to be generated directly by RealFlow in the blink of an eye, without having to cache gigabytes and gigabytes and gigabytes of data. This makes the difference between having all your displacement sequence in 3 minutes or 3 hours. Okay. So let me jump back over my presentation. This is a very nice tip. Try a real wave to determine your displacement settings. Don't play directly with the displacement settings over the mesh. You may want to try a real wave and deal with the displacement settings just right here. Okay, so you can play directly with these values here, and once you are happy with them, then transfer these values to your mesh. Okay, let me move a little bit. Okay, once the displacement has been created, as in my previous case here, not this one, but I think I delete the displacement, but it doesn't matter. Okay, once you have created your displacement, you don't have to evaluate the displacement all the time in every single pass. So bear in mind that if the displacement is created, use the cache option here. Another important thing is the in regards to the displacement, the projection, the sort of projection. You may want to apply the displacement depending on the UV particles, on the UVs of the particles themselves, or a simple top projection if you're dealing with a static mass of fluid, or if this mass of fluid is moving and moving and moving here, you may want to consider top projection with the average velocity, which is actually what we did here, as the particles are moving and moving and moving here in the y direction here. What we did is to use the top projection with the average velocity here. Okay. Of course, the gizmo, as we said before, is going to determine how the displacement is going to be lined up and the top projection that you have seen. You can use the displacement in two different ways. One is via the render kit or a texture shader for the mesh. Apply a displacement map directly in your render, or you can also you may want to consider to build your mesh here with the displacement in the use displacement option set to yes. So you will definitely generate a much more detailed geometry here. We'll see an example here. This is the mesh that we are going to build in RealFlow that we generated inside RealFlow. You can watch it here in full screen mode. And this mesh is really nice because of the displacement. The high frequency is going to provide a lot of nice detail here. Other assets, graphs for Hybrido wet maps, phone placement, mesh clipping, etc. For instance, with the powerful graphs that you can find in RealFlow, you can generate wet maps for this area here. Bear in mind that in our resources, here you have, in our resources area, you have the ability to download wet map script here. It's not a script, actually, it's a graph. If you want to take a very, very quick look to the graph, is something that is pretty cool. It was made by Alex Rival internally in Next Limit. It may be complex in the first sight, but it's not, trust me at all. This is very well commented, and these are the nodes where you will have to determine the different options for the wet maps. So it works to give a try. Once again, point you to the resources area and see how the wet maps graph, which is really, really nice and very straightforward and very very fast, by the way. Okay, so you will be able to generate these sort of things here. Another interesting way of keeping meshes, here you have a couple of cubes here, and you have the ability of trim the boundaries of the meshes, resulting in a much lighter geometry here. Again, this is done via graphs, and what we're going to do here is use the graphs to load a sequence of meshes, of binary meshes here, where we're going to specify the where the meshes are located, and what we're going to do is actually to write up the meshes, the clip meshes, according to this path location here. So what we're going to do is, let me update the timeline cache and go to frame 20 for instance. So what we're going to do is to place these two boxes here, and one box, the floor, the red one, is going to clip the bottom level of the mesh here, while the boundaries box, the white box here, is going to clip the sides of the mesh itself. This is really interesting for again lighter files, because you are getting rid of a huge bunch of triangles, and it's really straightforward. Again, in the resources area you may find very interesting tools like these sort of graphs. I also will recommend you to take a look at the foam placement according to the displacement offsets. The way of dealing with Hybrido is pretty much this one. You may want to consider go to this displacement and meshes video that you might find in the RealFlow Labs channel here, where our colleague Thomas Slick will go step by step in a very in-depth vision, very in-depth process in each one of these different details. Of course, once you are done with the main settings, with the main setups, it's not so simple as crank up the resolution and that's it, period. No, unfortunately, it's more than that. But consider specifically for using large scale simulations to work with independent domain of computation and the VIA and the job manager. This is absolutely crucial to get success in your RealFlow scenes. A few rendering tips here. This is the corridor, and this is the first mesh. And we tend to think that water is just transparent, period, and actually it's not. And the light enters inside the water, and you may want to decrease the transparency of the water. Actually, this is very easy to determine with Maxwell Render, which is the rendering engine that I use for this particular rendering. And it's just as simple as decrease the attenuation distance. Technically speaking, the attenuation distance factor is the amount of energy that the light is losing as far as it's entering inside the medium of the water. Okay, so in this particular case, the difference is really evident in terms of shader or material. Another useful tip is use displacement for sure. This is really going to make the difference. It's going to add much more detail over the mesh itself. And on top of these, place particles and particles and particles. These are the splash and foam particles that we simulated in the first pass, and this is the another render with the splash particles in the floor areas with some over here, and even you can distinguish here the wet maps over the floors. Okay. So once again, let me point you out to the resources area and the RealFlow Labs channels, specifically for the RealFlow 2013 training suite, is a must-see for every single RealFlow artist has to check these really nice videos, super very well straightforward and very easy to see. So I think we leave few questions and answers in the background. I'm not sure, Sterling, if you want me to wrap up here, because I think we ran out of time a little bit. And maybe for these questions that we weren't able to attend, we can certainly follow up and send a few bunch of wrap up resources, questions, answer questions, whatever.
Well, first of all, thank you so much. That was an awesome presentation, and I saw a lot of comments coming through the questions that people were very into it and loving it in general. One question that I think might benefit everyone for you to answer live in a little more detail, I think, is about scaling considerations with different platforms. Basically, I guess the units on different programs, Lightwave or Max or Maya, how that has to affect what you do with RealFlow.
Well, this is really important because we're very concerned about our users are not only Maya or Houdini or Lightwave or 3ds Max users. We have a really huge community of users using different platforms. And for sure, yeah, definitely, if we have feedback, in that sense, we'll be more than happy to figure out some guys webinar or tutorial afterwards, and then provide not only for Lightwave again, but for other 3D platforms, even not supported via plugin platforms such as, I'm thinking about Modo, for instance, where you can export or import Alembic stuff, so you can perfectly work with RealFlow and Modo, even though there's not a specific plugin for that. You can go through Alembic. But for sure, thank you very much for the feedback, and we will try to do our best as far as possible to provide more Lightwave stuff.
And we've also just got a few questions, Victor. If you want to just look in the in the question panel. There might be some others that you want to jump on. There's a question about it. Does Hybrido 2 support viscosity?
Well, certainly there are a lot of new features coming in the upcoming version, layer upgrades of RealFlow, and we're absolutely concerned about viscosity and some other interesting features. We have a lot of work lying ahead, but I can tell you that we're absolutely concerned about that, and hopefully we will have very great news in that sense. All
right. Well, I think that just about does it. There's some other questions trickling in, but if you want to talk about foam and mist inside Cinema 4D, some of these are rather specific. I don't know if you want to address them or leave them for another day or time.
Well, the important thing here is, I think, is to demonstrate to people how RealFlow is a very straightforward tool, and it's really important to get familiar with the tool via the resources that we provide. Unfortunately, it's really hard to synthesize in just 1 single hour only RealFlow knowledge man for Hybrido in this case, or I don't know, currently or factors or whatever. But fortunately, we provide a lot of resources and stuff, and definitely the RealFlow Labs channels. I want to emphasize this and reinforce this idea because it's really a must-see for any RealFlow like this. I think it's really worth spending some time watching it, and it's really very easy to see and hopefully enjoy some of these videos.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Victor. That was
Thank you.
That was awesome.
Thank you to all the attendees.
And thank you everyone for coming, for attending and asking great questions and listening. And of course, we're going to be putting this on YouTube. So if you want to review or show a friend or anything, it will be online. You'll be getting a link for that. And of course, if you guys are ready for another license or a render node, call up RFX, and if you talk to us before Friday, we'll be able to take 20% off.
Thank you so much, and thank you all attendees, and hopefully I will hope to meet you all very soon. We're working on more webinars and training stuff in the future. Thank you very much, starting with all the RealFlow community users, and of course the team who has been in the background with the Q&A.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye, everyone. Have a great one.